Billionaire CEO saw a black waitress hiding to eat leftovers. What he discovered broke his heart. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Picture this, a high-end restaurant in downtown New York City, the kind of place where the waiters wear pressed suits, and the guests are some of the wealthiest people in the world. This isn't just a place to eat, it's a statement, a venue for business deals, where millions of dollars change hands without a second thought. At one of the far corners of the dining area, Naomi, a young black waitress in her mid-20s, had just finished cleaning her last table of the evening. She was exhausted, her feet sore from hours of walking on the marble floors. The restaurant was now quiet, the hustle and bustle of dinner service winding down as the last few guests trickled out. Naomi had grown used to this late-night ritual. It wasn't uncommon for her to work overtime, but tonight was different. The restaurant's kitchen staff had already packed up, and Naomi found herself alone in the back room. She had planned to head home, but her stomach growled. Naomi had been so focused on taking care of the customers that she hadn't eaten much all day. She had worked 3 shifts straight, running on caffeine and the occasional snack from the staff room. She wasn't expecting to have anything for dinner at this hour, but when she glanced around, she spotted some leftover meals that hadn't been cleared off the counters. She knew it wasn't much, but it was enough to satisfy her hunger. Quietly, she slipped into a corner of the kitchen, far from prying eyes, and began to nibble on a few cold bits of food left behind by guests. She wasn't ashamed, but she did feel a pang of embarrassment. This was her life, after all. She was just a waitress, working hard to make ends meet. But in this world of opulence, where expensive wines and gourmet dishes were served on gold-trimmed plates, Naomi often felt invisible. It wasn't the first time she had hidden away to eat leftovers. It was the only way she could get by without making others feel uncomfortable. She didn't want to be seen as less than because she couldn't afford the lavish meals the guests enjoyed. But little did she know, tonight was going to change everything. Richard Hawthorne, a billionaire tech mogul, was just finishing his business dinner in the private dining room. He had spent the evening negotiating a multi-million-dollar deal, but his mind was elsewhere. Richard had everything money could buy: luxury cars, a sprawling mansion in the Hamptons, a private jet. But he often found himself questioning the meaning of it all. As he passed through the kitchen on his way out, he caught sight of Naomi in the far corner. At first, he thought she was simply cleaning up after a long night. But when he took a closer look, he saw something that stopped him in his tracks. There she was, quietly eating food meant for someone else, in the dimly lit corner of the kitchen, as if trying to avoid being noticed. Something about it struck Richard deeply. Naomi wasn't just a waitress. She was a young woman who worked tirelessly in a world where people like him took everything for granted. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Naomi didn't look away, but she did lower her gaze, embarrassed. Richard's heart sank. He had seen so many people like her, hardworking, overlooked, but this time, it felt different. He watched for a moment, then slowly approached. "You don't have to do that," Richard said quietly, his voice soft, but carrying weight. Naomi froze, caught off guard. She had been so focused on her food that she hadn't noticed Richard's presence until it was too late. She didn't know what to say. He had caught her in a vulnerable moment, and she couldn't help but feel a rush of shame. "It's okay," she said quickly, standing up and brushing her hands together. "I didn't want to waste food." Richard stepped closer, his eyes scanning the remnants of the meal she had been eating. There was something about the situation that made him realize how little he truly understood the lives of people like Naomi. "I wasn't going to waste it either," Richard replied. Softly, "I think you deserve better than this." Much better. Naomi didn't know how to respond. For a moment, she just stood there, uncertain. She had lived her entire life feeling invisible, and yet here was this billionaire, this man of unimaginable wealth, acknowledging her in a way no one had ever done before. But instead of feeling grateful, Naomi felt a rush of confusion and unease. Why was he offering her sympathy? She didn't need pity. All she needed was the respect she had been denied for so long. But what Richard said next was something that would stay with her forever. I'm sorry you're going through this, he said, his voice sincere. I never realized how much people like you do just to survive. Let me help you. Naomi blinked, unsure if she had heard him right. What was he really offering? Naomi stood frozen for a moment, her heart racing as Richard's words sank in. She wasn't sure if she had heard him right. Let me help you, he had said. But what did that even mean? No one had ever spoken to her this way before. People like Richard Hawthorne, billionaires with yachts and private jets, didn't care about waitresses like her. They didn't notice the long hours, the exhaustion, the sacrifices. Naomi had always lived her life in the shadows, doing her best to make ends meet and keep her head down. So why was this stranger offering her help now? Was he just another rich person trying to make himself feel better about the world? Naomi wasn't sure what to think. She had been overlooked and underestimated her entire life, and she had learned to be cautious. She had been through enough to know that help from people like Richard often came with strings attached. But as she looked up at him, something in his eyes made her hesitate. There was sincerity there. There was no arrogance, no pity, just a quiet understanding. It was as if he truly saw her, not just as a waitress, but as a person who deserved more. I don't need your charity, Naomi said, her voice steady but laced with hesitation. Richard nodded, his expression softening. It's not charity, he said, his tone calm. It's a chance for you to have what you deserve. Naomi's gaze dropped to the floor for a moment, the weight of his words settling in. Was this really happening? Could she trust him? For a brief moment, she thought about rejecting his offer, telling him to leave her alone. But then she remembered how hard she had worked just to survive. How many nights had she gone to bed with an empty stomach? How many times had she gone without, just to make sure her daughter had enough? Naomi wasn't used to accepting help, especially from someone like Richard. But as she looked up again, she saw the genuine concern in his eyes, and a small voice inside her wondered, what if this was her chance? Why would you help me? Naomi asked, her voice quiet, almost uncertain. Richard took a deep breath before replying, his eyes never leaving hers. Because I've seen people like you all my life. People who work harder than anyone I know, and yet they get nothing in return. I've built my empire by working hard, but I've also had the privilege of never having to struggle like you have. I've been blind to the world you live in, but I'm starting to see it now. You deserve more than this. Naomi felt a lump form in her throat. It wasn't often that someone took the time to understand her, to recognize her worth. Richard's words were different from the usual hollow praise she received from her bosses or customers. They were real. They made her feel seen. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt like that. Richard continued, his voice soft but firm. I want to offer you a job at my company. Not as a waitress, but in a position where you can show your true potential. You're smart, hardworking, and you deserve to have a future that isn't limited by where you work or what people think of you. This is my offer. And I'm not asking for anything in return except for you to give yourself the chance to be more. Naomi's breath caught in her chest. A job at his company. A chance to build a future for herself and her daughter? She had never imagined anything like this could happen. It felt like a dream, like she was standing on the edge of something big, something that could change everything. She looked down at the food on the counter. Cold, leftover scraps from a meal she hadn't even ordered, and felt a wave of shame wash over her. She had always accepted this kind of life, always told herself it was all she deserved. But now, for the first time, she wondered if maybe there was more out there. Maybe Richard wasn't just offering her a job. Maybe he was offering her a chance to start over. She took a deep breath and finally spoke, her voice steady but filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. What do I have to do? Richard smiled, a small, encouraging smile that made Naomi feel like she was about to take her first step toward something new. Just say yes. Give yourself the chance to be who you truly are. Naomi hesitated for a moment longer, but something inside her told her this was the right decision. She nodded slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek as she realized that this was the moment her life could change. Yes, she said softly. I'll take the chance. Richard reached out and shook her hand. You won't regret it, he said. And for the first time in a long time, Naomi believed him. Naomi woke up the next morning feeling the weight of the decision she had made. The apartment was quiet, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound that filled the otherwise still space. As she sat up, she couldn't help but think back to the conversation with Richard. It had felt like something out of a movie, A life-altering offer made by a man who had no reason to care about her, yet he did. She had told herself she'd be cautious. But somewhere between his words and her heart, she had given him a yes she wasn't sure she had fully understood. Naomi stood up, stretching as she walked to the small window overlooking the street. New York was waking up, the first rays of sunlight beginning to paint the city in a soft golden glow. She thought about her daughter, Amara, still asleep in the next room. The girl's face, peaceful and innocent, was a constant reminder of why Naomi kept fighting. She didn't want her daughter to grow up in the same struggle, to face the same barriers Naomi had faced her entire life. She wanted something better for her. As she made her way to the kitchen, she found herself lost in thought. Was she really ready for this? A job offer from Richard Hawthorne was more than just a chance to move up. It was an opportunity to escape the cycle that had defined her life for so long. It meant more than just a paycheck. It meant respect, recognition, and a future that wasn't built on survival, but on potential. Naomi had worked hard her entire life to make ends meet. But she had always been overlooked, passed over for promotions, ignored in favor of others who seemed to have more privilege or opportunity. This job could change everything. But then there was the fear of being out of place, of being unqualified, of not belonging in the world Richard inhabited. She wasn't like him. She didn't have his education or his connections. She had a hard-earned degree from community college and a lifetime of service jobs. What if they saw through her? What if, when it came down to it, she wasn't enough? She shook her head, trying to shake off the doubts. She wasn't going to let fear dictate her future. If she had learned anything in life, it was that you couldn't wait for the perfect moment to act. You had to make your own opportunities. With a deep breath, she grabbed her phone, tapping the screen to check the time. It was already past 9. She had to get to work. The thought of facing Richard again made her nervous, but she couldn't back down now. She needed this. As she dressed, Naomi ran through the conversation in her head. Richard's offer had been so unexpected. She had expected a polite gesture, maybe a thank you for her hard work. Instead, he had looked at her like she was someone worth investing in. No one had ever done that before. Not like this. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew she couldn't pass up this chance. By the time Naomi arrived at the restaurant, she was both anxious and excited. She was greeted by the manager, who gave her an odd look but didn't say anything about the previous night. He had likely already heard about her interaction with Richard, but he kept his distance, not wanting to cause trouble. Naomi could feel the weight of the eyes on her as she stepped into the kitchen. The other waitstaff were busy setting up for the next shift, whispering among themselves. Naomi's presence felt different today, like she had crossed some invisible line. She wasn't just another waitress now. She was someone who had been seen, who had been offered something more. The day passed in a blur of trays, orders, and small talk. Naomi focused on her work, trying to stay grounded, but the thought of what Richard had said lingered in the back of her mind. By the time her shift was over, she was exhausted, both physically and mentally. She hadn't seen Richard again. He had left after the meeting, but he had promised to follow up with her. Naomi hadn't expected anything more than a phone call or an email, but as she walked out of the restaurant that evening, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Richard. "I hope your shift went well today. I'd like to set up a time for us to talk about the next steps. Call me when you get the chance." Naomi stood there, the weight of the phone in her hand making her heart race. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She took a deep breath and dialed his number. Richard picked up on the first ring. "Naomi, I'm glad to hear from you," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "How did today go?" Naomi hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "It went fine. I've been thinking about your offer, and I'm ready to take the next step." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Then Richard spoke again, his tone warm but direct. "I'm glad to hear that. I've been thinking about you as well, Naomi. Let's meet tomorrow to discuss the details. I'll have a car sent for you." Naomi could hardly believe what she was hearing. A car? For her? The thought of being picked up in a luxury vehicle was so foreign to her. But it was happening. This was real. "Okay," she said, her voice steady now. "I'll be there." She hung up the phone, the reality of the situation settling in. This was her chance to change everything. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. Naomi couldn't believe how quickly everything had shifted. The car that Richard had sent arrived early the next day, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. Naomi stood in. front of her modest apartment, staring at the vehicle in disbelief. She had never ridden in something like this before, let alone been offered a ride to a meeting with someone like Richard Hawthorne. It felt like a dream, a life she had never imagined could be hers. She took a deep breath, adjusting her hair and her clothes, trying to steady her nerves. Today was the day her life could change, and she wasn't going to let fear hold her back. As she slid into the car, the driver smiled at her and nodded, his professionalism making her feel even more out of place. But she kept her composure. The ride to the corporate headquarters was quick, the streets of New York flashing by as she tried to focus on the task ahead. When they arrived, Naomi was ushered into a massive glass building. The lobby was grand, the marble floors gleaming under the soft glow of the chandeliers. She had never been in a place like this before. The air felt different here, clean, polished, filled with ambition. It wasn't the kind of place someone like her was supposed to walk into, but here she was. She was led to an elevator, which took her up to the top floor. As the doors opened, Naomi was met with an expansive office space, high up in the building with panoramic views of the city. It was like something out of a movie, modern, minimalist, and impressive. Richard was waiting for her, standing by the large glass windows. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his presence commanding but not intimidating. Naomi felt a small pang of anxiety, but she pushed it aside. She had made it this far. Now, all she had to do was prove that she belonged. "Naomi, I'm glad you could make it," Richard said, his tone warm and inviting. "Please, have a seat." He motioned toward a chair across from his desk, and Naomi sat down, trying to keep her hands steady. "How was the ride over?" he asked. "It was fine," Naomi replied, her voice steady but her mind racing. Richard smiled, nodding. "Good. I'm glad you're comfortable." There was a brief pause as Richard looked at her, his eyes assessing but not judgmental. Naomi couldn't help but feel the weight of his gaze, but she refused to look away. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to let him see her falter. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," Richard continued, leaning back in his chair. "I know this opportunity is a big one, but I also want you to know that I'm not offering this because I feel sorry for you. I'm offering it because I believe in your potential." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. No one had ever looked at her and seen her for more than what she was on the surface. "Thank you," Naomi said quietly, her voice full of emotion. Richard nodded. "You've been overlooked your entire life, Naomi. I can see that, but you've worked hard. You've fought for everything you've earned. And that's exactly why I want you on my team." Naomi couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude. She had worked so hard, always feeling like she was invisible to the world, always fighting for scraps. But here, in this office, in this moment, she finally felt seen. "I know you're probably wondering why me," Richard continued, leaning forward slightly. "The truth is, I need people who think outside the box. People who aren't afraid to challenge the status quo. You've been doing that every day, even if you didn't know it. Your resilience, your ability to see things from a different perspective, that's what I need." Naomi felt the weight of his words. He wasn't just offering her a job. He was offering her a chance to prove herself, to show the world, and herself, that she was capable of so much more. "I've been where you are," Richard added, his voice softening. "I know what it's like to feel like you're always fighting uphill, always being underestimated. But I also know that it's possible to break through. You just have to be willing to take the leap." Naomi nodded, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. She was standing on the edge of something big, something life-changing. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady and determined. Richard smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Good. Because I'm ready to give you the chance you deserve." Naomi's heart swelled with emotion. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when everything she had worked for could finally pay off. Richard extended his hand across the desk. "Welcome to the team, Naomi." She shook his hand, her grip firm and confident. In that moment, Naomi knew that her life had changed. She wasn't just another waitress anymore. She was someone with a future that was finally hers to shape. Naomi's first day at Richard's company felt like stepping into another world. She had always dreamed of a life where she didn't have to hide in the shadows, a life where she could stand tall and be proud of her accomplishments. But walking into the sleek office building on the Upper East Side of New York City, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place. The building was enormous, towering above the streets with glass walls that reflected the bustling city below. The lobby was pristine, its marble floors gleaming under the soft, ambient lighting. Naomi was escorted to the elevator by one of the staff members, a young woman dressed in a tailored suit who smiled warmly, but with an air of sophistication that Naomi couldn't quite grasp. As the elevator ascended to the top floor, Naomi's nerves grew. She had worked hard her whole life, always feeling like she was on the outside looking in. Now, here she was, about to enter a world that was built on wealth and power, worlds that seemed so distant from the life she had known. The elevator doors opened, and Naomi was led into an open-plan office with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. Desks were arranged neatly, each one occupied by people in business attire, typing away on their computers or discussing strategies in hushed tones. Naomi had never seen such a polished, professional environment. It felt like a different dimension, one where everything was perfectly in place. She was introduced to her new team, young, bright individuals who had all attended Ivy League schools, with impressive resumes that Naomi could only dream of. They welcomed her politely, but Naomi could feel their eyes on her, wondering what someone like her was doing here. She was used to this feeling, being the only person in the room who didn't quite fit in, but it was harder to ignore now that she was surrounded by people who had lived lives so different from hers. As the day went on, Naomi found herself growing more and more uncomfortable. She was assigned to shadow one of the senior managers, who was a fast-talking woman named Jessica. Jessica was confident, sharp, and well-versed in the intricacies of corporate lingo. Naomi struggled to keep up, feeling like every word she spoke was a step further into a world she didn't quite understand. By lunch, Naomi was feeling overwhelmed. She hadn't made any connections, and her mind was racing with doubt. She had spent her entire life learning how to survive on the margins, but now, for the first time, she wondered if she had what it took to thrive in this world. Jessica noticed Naomi's unease and invited her to lunch at a nearby cafe. As they sat down, Jessica began to open up about her own experiences. "I get it," she said, her voice softening. "You're probably feeling out of your depth, like everyone here is speaking a language you don't quite understand. I was the same way when I first started." Naomi nodded, grateful for the understanding. "How did you handle it?" she asked. "Well, it wasn't easy," Jessica said, taking a sip of her iced tea. "But the thing is, I had to stop thinking about fitting in. I had to start thinking about what I could bring to the table. What made me different? And that's when everything changed." Naomi listened intently, her mind racing. For so long, she had tried to blend in, to be like everyone else, to hide the parts of her life that didn't fit the mold. But now, Jessica's words were opening a new way of thinking. Maybe Naomi didn't have to be like everyone else. Maybe her unique perspective was exactly what the company needed. The rest of the lunch passed in a blur as Jessica shared more insights into the company culture, offering Naomi tips on how to navigate the corporate world. By the time they returned to the office, Naomi felt a little less like an outsider. She still had a long way to go, but she could see now that she didn't have to be anyone other than herself. That evening, as she left the building and stepped into the cool night air, Naomi felt a sense of quiet pride. She had taken the first step into a new chapter of her life, one that was filled with possibilities she had never allowed herself to dream of. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that for the first time, in a long time, she was finally in a place where she could become the person she had always wanted to be. And that, she realized, was just the beginning. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind for Naomi. She immersed herself in her new role, absorbing every piece of information, every challenge that came her way. Each day felt like a new test, a chance to prove that she belonged. The world she had stepped into was still daunting: sharp suits, polished shoes, and high-stakes decisions. But something had shifted in Naomi. She no longer felt like an outsider. With each passing day, she found her voice, her place in the company. Her confidence grew, as did her understanding of the work she was doing. Richard had been right. She wasn't just there to blend in. She had something unique to offer. She had always known how to work hard, how to survive, but now she was learning how to thrive. Slowly, Naomi began to make her mark. She was quick to pick up on things, strategies, trends, and even the nuances of office politics. Her ability to think outside the box didn't go unnoticed. She started taking on more responsibility, contributing to meetings, and offering insights that surprised even the most experienced members of the team. One afternoon, Richard called her into his office. Naomi's heart raced as she walked into his sleek, glass-walled office, the same place she had first met him. This time, however, she wasn't nervous. She had come a long way since that day. Richard greeted her with a smile and motioned for her to sit down. "Naomi, I've been watching your progress over the past few weeks," he said, his voice calm but full of approval. "You've done a great job integrating into the team. But more than that, you've brought something new to the table. Your perspective, your resilience. It's been a breath of fresh air." Naomi felt a wave of pride wash over her. Richard had always been honest with her, and hearing him say that felt like a validation of everything she had worked for. She had earned her place. "Thank you, Richard," she replied, her voice steady. "I've been working hard, and I'm glad it's been paying off." Richard leaned forward slightly, his expression becoming more serious. "I've been thinking about your future here. You're more than just a waitress now, Naomi. You're becoming a key part of this company. I'd like to offer you something more." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. Was this it? Was this the moment she had been waiting for? "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I'd like to offer you a promotion," Richard said, his eyes meeting hers. "You've shown great promise, and I think you're ready for more responsibility. I want you to take on a leadership role in the team, helping guide and mentor the newer employees. You've got what it takes to lead." Naomi was speechless for a moment. A promotion? A leadership role? This was more than she had ever imagined. It felt like everything she had dreamed of and worked for was finally coming to fruition. She had spent her life working so hard just to survive, but now she was being offered a chance to lead, to help others the way she had been helped. I don't know what to say," Naomi stammered, her mind racing. "Say yes," Richard said with a small smile. "I wouldn't offer this if I didn't believe in you." Naomi took a deep breath. It felt surreal, but she knew in that moment that this was the opportunity she had been waiting for. It was the culmination of everything she had worked for. "Yes," she said, her voice firm with determination. "I accept." Richard smiled broadly, his approval evident. "I'm looking forward to seeing what you'll do in this new role, Naomi. You've earned it." As Naomi left Richard's office, she felt a sense of exhilaration. The fear she had felt when she first walked into the company was gone. She was no longer just the waitress who had been overlooked for years. She was someone who had worked hard, fought for every opportunity, and had finally earned her place. As she walked back to her desk, Naomi couldn't help but smile to herself. She had made it, and she was just getting started. Naomi stepped into the office the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose. The promotion Richard had offered her felt like a dream come true, but now, the reality of it set in. She had worked so hard to get here, but with this new responsibility came the pressure to prove herself even more. She took a deep breath as she walked through the doors of the office, feeling the familiar eyes of her colleagues on her. There was no going back now. She had to embrace this new role, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever doubted her. Her first task was to meet with her new team. Naomi had been assigned to manage a small group of junior employees who had recently joined the company. As she entered the conference room, she was greeted with polite nods and hesitant smiles. It was clear that some of them were unsure about having a new manager, especially one who had started out just a few weeks ago, but Naomi was determined to prove herself. She had been in their shoes once, unsure of what to expect and feeling like an outsider. But now, she was the one they were looking to for guidance. "Good morning, everyone," Naomi began, her voice steady and confident. "I know this is a big change for all of us, but I want you to know that I'm here to help you succeed. I've been where you are, and I know how hard it can be to adjust to a new role. But together, we can make this work." The team members listened intently, and Naomi could see the skepticism in their eyes slowly begin to fade. She wasn't just talking the talk, she was walking the walk. She had been where they were, and now she was in a position to help them navigate their own journeys. Over the next few weeks, Naomi threw herself into her new role. She worked closely with her team, offering advice, guidance, and support whenever they needed it. She listened to their concerns, helped them solve problems, and celebrated their successes. Slowly but surely, she built the trust of her team. But the real test came one afternoon when a major project was on the line. Richard had assigned Naomi's team to handle an important presentation for a potential investor. The pressure was on. Naomi knew that if they messed this up, it could set them back, and she wasn't about to let that happen. The day before the presentation, Naomi sat down with her team to review their work. There were some last-minute changes that needed to be made, and one of the junior employees, Mark, was struggling to get everything together. Naomi could see the frustration on his face as he tried to finalize the presentation slides. "Mark, what's going on?" Naomi asked, sitting down beside him. "You've got this. Just take a step back and think about the big picture." Mark looked up, his eyes filled with doubt. "I don't know if I can do it," he said quietly. "What if I mess up? This is a big deal." Naomi placed a hand on his shoulder, offering him a reassuring smile. "Listen, I've been in your shoes. I know what it's like to feel like the pressure is too much. But you've got the skills. You've been working hard, and I believe in you. We're in this together." Mark nodded, taking a deep breath. Naomi could see the tension in his shoulders start to ease. He wasn't alone. He had a team behind him, and Naomi was there to guide him through it. The next day, the team presented their work to the investor. Naomi watched from the back of the room as Mark confidently delivered his portion of the presentation. It was flawless. The investor was impressed, and the deal was closed. Naomi couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had led her team to success, not by being the smartest person in the room, but by believing in them and empowering them to do their best. Later that afternoon, Richard called Naomi into his office. "You did great today," he said, his voice filled with approval. "Your team pulled through because of your leadership. I knew I made the right choice." Naomi smiled, the weight of the praise sinking in. "Thank you, Richard. But it wasn't just me. It was the whole team. We did this together." Richard nodded, his eyes glinting with pride. "That's what I like to hear. You're not just managing the team. You're helping them grow, just like you did. That's leadership." Naomi left the office feeling a surge of emotion. She had done it. She had proven to herself, and to everyone else, that she belonged in this world. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a leader, a mentor, someone who had the power to shape her future and the future of those around her. As she walked out of the building that day, the weight of the city around her felt different. It didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like a place where anything was possible. She had earned her place here, and no one could take that away from her. As Naomi sat at her desk, the weight of her achievements settled in. The past few months had been a blur. So much had changed, and yet, it felt like everything had finally come together. She had earned the respect of her team, helped guide them to success, and proven to Richard that she had what it took to lead. But the true challenge was still ahead. Naomi knew that the real test of her abilities was yet to come. She had to ensure that the growth she had experienced wasn't just a one-time success, but a foundation for her future. The pressure to perform was still there, and it was heavier than ever. Her mind raced with thoughts of the next steps. How could she keep up the momentum? How could she continue to prove her worth? Richard had given her the tools, the opportunity, and the trust, but Naomi knew that now. It was up to her to build something lasting. She spent the next few days working tirelessly, meeting with her team, reviewing their progress, and setting new goals. The pace was fast, but Naomi thrived in it. She had learned to embrace the challenge, to find energy in the pressure, rather than be crushed by it. The office was buzzing with excitement, and Naomi's team was more motivated than ever. They had come a long way since the first day she stepped into the role of manager, and now they were achieving things that Naomi had never imagined. She had become a part of something bigger than herself, a team that was capable of great things. As the weeks went by, Naomi began to feel the effects of her hard work. The respect she had earned wasn't just from her team. It was spreading throughout the company. People who had once doubted her were now turning to her for advice. And even Richard was impressed by her ability to handle the pressure and lead with grace. One afternoon, as Naomi was walking to a meeting, she ran into a colleague from a different department. "Naomi, I just wanted to say," the colleague said, her voice warm, "I've been hearing a lot of great things about you lately. You've really turned things around." Naomi smiled, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. She wasn't used to receiving such compliments, but it felt good to know that her efforts were being recognized. It wasn't about the praise. It was about knowing that her hard work was paying off. She had spent so many years working in the background, unnoticed, and now, for the first time, she was stepping into the light. As the day went on, Naomi received more and more recognition for her efforts. It was a strange feeling, one that she hadn't allowed herself to enjoy for a long time. But today, she allowed herself to bask in it, just a little. It was a reminder of how far she had come and how much she had accomplished. That evening, after a long day of meetings and work, Naomi sat in her apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened. She thought about her daughter, Amara, and the life she was building for them both. It wasn't just about the promotion or the recognition or even the work she was doing. It was about the future, Amara's future, and the future Naomi was now able to provide. She had gone from barely making ends meet to now being in a position where she could shape her own destiny. And that was the most powerful feeling of all. Naomi thought back to the days when she had felt invisible, when she had been the one overlooked and ignored. She had learned to survive, to make do with less, to keep her head down and focus on getting through the day. But now, she was learning how to thrive. She was no longer a waitress working for tips. She was a leader, a mentor, someone who had the power to influence the direction of the company, and in turn, her own life. Naomi took a deep breath, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had earned this. She had fought for it. And now, she was ready to take on whatever came next. The future was hers to create, and she wasn't going to waste it. The next day, Richard called her into his office again. This time, there was no talk of promotions or accolades. He simply looked at her with that approving smile and said, "I'm proud of you, Naomi. You've done something incredible here." Naomi nodded, a quiet pride in her chest. "Thank you, Richard. I couldn't have done it without the opportunity you gave me." Richard's smile widened. "You've proven that you're more than capable. You've earned this place, Naomi." And with that, Naomi knew that this was just the beginning. She wasn't done yet. There was still so much more to achieve, so many more lives to impact, and so much more to give. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready. She was ready to take on the world. As Naomi walked into the office on a crisp Tuesday morning, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for years. The anxiety that used to accompany every step, every meeting, every decision was gone. The hard work had paid off, and Naomi was no longer the quiet, overlooked waitress trying to make it through the day. She was now a respected leader in a company that valued her for her skills, her perspective, and her resilience. She had made it, not just for herself, but for her daughter, Amara, and for everyone who had ever doubted her. Looking around the office, Naomi saw the same polished faces, the same sharp suits, but this time, she didn't feel out of place. She belonged here. She had earned her spot, and no one could take that from her. It was a feeling that was both humbling and empowering. She had fought for everything she had, but more than that, she had learned to believe in herself. Her phone buzzed on her desk, snapping her back to the present. It was a message from Richard. "Naomi, I need to see you in my office. We're bringing someone in for a new role, and I want you to meet them. I think you'll be a great mentor." Naomi smiled as she read the message. She knew that her journey wasn't over. Now, it was about helping others rise the way she had. She walked to Richard's office with a sense of pride, knowing that her leadership was valued, and she was ready to share her experiences with someone new. As she entered the office, Richard stood up, shaking her hand with a smile. "Naomi, I'm glad you're here. I want you to meet our new recruit. This person has a lot of potential, but I want you to show them the ropes. You've become an example of what we strive for in this company." Naomi nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had gone from the one who needed guidance to the one who was now offering it. It was surreal, but in the best way possible. The door opened, and a young woman walked in. Naomi immediately recognized the look in her eyes: uncertainty, curiosity, a little bit of fear. It was the same look Naomi had worn when she first started. "This is Maya," Richard said, introducing the young woman. "She's joining the team as a junior manager, and I think she could learn a lot from you." Naomi extended her hand to Maya with a warm smile. "It's nice to meet you, Maya. Don't worry, we all start somewhere. You'll find your rhythm soon enough." Maya hesitated for a moment before shaking Naomi's hand. "I just hope I can do well here," she said, her voice tinged with doubt. Naomi could hear the fear in her voice, the same fear she had once felt. It was familiar, but Naomi was no longer afraid. She had faced those fears and conquered them. "You can," Naomi said firmly. "I know how it feels to wonder if you belong, but you do. We're all here to help you succeed." The conversation flowed easily after that, with Naomi offering advice on the company culture, the challenges Maya might face, and the lessons she had learned. As Naomi spoke, she realized how far she had come. She had never imagined that one day she would be the one mentoring someone. But now, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Richard watched the interaction with approval. "You've done an incredible job, Naomi," he said. "Not only have you led your team to success, but now you're helping shape the future of this company." Naomi smiled, her eyes meeting Richard's. "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without the opportunity you gave me." Richard nodded, his pride in her evident. "You earned it, Naomi. You've shown that with hard work, resilience, and the right mindset, anything is possible." As the meeting ended, Naomi walked back to her desk, her mind racing with thoughts of the future. She had come so far, but she knew this was only the beginning. She was no longer just surviving. She was thriving. And now, she had the opportunity to help others thrive, too. Her journey had been difficult, but every step had led her here. She had fought against the odds, proven her worth, and now she was ready to make a lasting impact. Naomi looked out the window, watching the city below, knowing that her story wasn't just about her success. It was about the power of believing in yourself, the importance of hard work, and the strength that comes from helping others along the way. She was no longer invisible. She had become someone who could make a difference. And that was the most powerful thing of all.